Welcome to 5 at 5 with Stone Law Offices. I'm attorney Brendan Bybee with 5 minutes on healthcare powers of attorney and why you need them. Now, as long as you are alive and healthy and well, the fact of the matter is you don't. You don't need one when you are able to communicate your wishes regarding your health to any care providers you have. Say you get a broken finger, broken leg, certainly you can communicate your wishes, make any decisions that you might need to make regarding your health in those circumstances. But what if you're not healthy, well, and able? What if you are unable to communicate? What if you are in the middle of a procedure and are under anesthesia and something needs to be done, something is going wrong, and somebody needs to communicate with the care providers what your wishes are regarding your continuing care in those circumstances? Then you absolutely need a healthcare power of attorney. If you do not have a healthcare power of attorney, then the circumstances are going to be confusing. The doctors are not going to know who to speak with. In some cases, if you have a spouse, they may choose to communicate with that spouse. They may choose to follow the instructions of that spouse. But the truth of the matter is, without that healthcare power of attorney, they're not necessarily obligated to follow your spouse's instructions. And the truth of the matter is, not everybody chooses their spouse as their healthcare power of attorney to make those decisions for them. Now, most of you that probably would do that. Some of you who are watching this maybe wouldn't, and in those cases, doctors are certainly concerned about liability, as well as following all of their oaths and obligations and ethics to preserve and maintain your life in those circumstances. Now, what a healthcare power of attorney does is name that person or those people who are able to communicate your wishes to the healthcare providers. For those situations where perhaps you're going in under an emergency situation because of a traumatic event, or whether a traumatic event has arisen in what was otherwise ordinary medical circumstances, they now find themselves needing to maybe take a right or a left turn, and the healthcare power of attorney allows you to name ahead of time who's going to make that decision. Who do you trust that understands your wishes, your goals, your feelings, and perhaps understands your objections, whether they be personal, intellectual, religious, or otherwise, to one treatment versus another. If you have not named somebody in advance, then it may be a bit of a scramble, or it may just be that status quo has to be maintained for a long period of time where otherwise you have made would have made other decisions. Again, when you have multiple people who are potentially parties that could make those decisions, then perhaps they're now herding cats trying to get your children to come to a consensus on what those decisions are going to be. Perhaps there is conflict and indecision among those children regarding your health care, and disagreement over who should be in charge of those decisions. And all of this, again, causes delays, which can further be detrimental to your health and can be detrimental to family harmony. So again, to avoid these is why we do healthcare powers of attorney. Avoid situations where perhaps a court order is needed in order to make decisions that otherwise you could have made ahead of time. Now, in addition to just making decisions about treatment A versus treatment B, in your healthcare power of attorney, you're also making a few decisions regarding end-of-life care and where perhaps you may be housed after a state of attaining a state of incapacity. Where are you going to reside? Are you going to be able to stay in your home? Do you have instructions to be able to keep you in your home as long as possible? Or are they going to move you to a care facility perhaps sooner than you would have chosen otherwise? What about those end-of-life care decisions? Are you willing to receive artificially provided health, nutrition and hydration for a long period of time, even if it's not going to restore any meaningful health or vitality, if it's only going to keep your bodily tissues alive for a prolonged period of time, where otherwise you might be able to die naturally, and perhaps that's your wish if you haven't left those instructions ahead of time. then your doctors may be left to their Hippocratic oath and doing whatever interventions they may have, even if that's prolonging your life beyond what you otherwise would have chosen. So again, to be able to make these decisions ahead of time, to avoid fights over healthcare decisions, to avoid fights over long-term guardianship and care over your health and welfare in situations where you may be in a state of incapacity for an extended period of time. Again, you have the opportunity to name those people in a healthcare power of attorney. You have the opportunity to decide ahead of time and to communicate ahead of time to the people that you've named what it is you do and do not want to have happen with your body. And now, at the current time, we're dealing with a pandemic, which has brought to many of us a stronger sense of our own mortality and the possibility that we may be in an extended state of incapacity and deep need for healthcare services. For some of you, you may have felt one way about some of those decisions ahead of that pandemic, but now when you consider ventilators and and whether or not those are things that you want to be on, perhaps where before you thought you didn't want to ever be on a ventilator, now you do, and vice versa. Again, if you've done a healthcare power of attorney before, it may be that the people that you've named are no longer the people that you would trust, or they're not in the same order that you would prefer to have them serve. In those cases, it may be that your decisions regarding those end-of-life care decisions has changed because of some of the experiences that you've had that have brought some of those things closer to home. If you haven't done a power of attorney, or if it's been a long time since you've looked at that, it's important to review that to make sure things are still up to date with your current wishes. And because those decisions can be complicated, can be difficult to understand, because the language of the decisions that the statutory forms permit and provide for you to make can be hard to understand, and you may not know whether your initials on those choices are the decision that you want or the opposite of that decision that you want. It's important to get legal advice and to come in and see us to help us help you get your healthcare in order and avoid the risks that come without having an up-to-date healthcare power of attorney.